The cold October wind cut through Lisa's thin jacket like a knife. She pulled her 7-year-old daughter Mia closer as they crouched behind the old red barn. The paint was peeling off the wooden walls and she could smell hay and animals from inside. Her stomach made a loud growling sound that seemed to echo in the quiet evening air. "Mommy, I'm still hungry," Mia whispered, her small voice barely audible over the wind whistling through the bare tree branches above them. Lisa's heart broke a little more. She reached into her worn-out purse and pulled out half of a bruised apple she had found earlier that day. The grocery store manager had thrown it in the dumpster because it had brown spots all over it. Most people would never eat something like that, but when you haven't had a proper meal in 2 days, even rotten fruit looks like a feast. "Here, sweetheart. We'll share this one," Lisa said, trying to keep her voice cheerful. She wiped the apple on her sleeve, though it didn't really make it any cleaner. The sweet smell mixed with the sour odor of decay made her stomach turn, but she forced herself to take a small bite first. She wanted to make sure it was safe for Mia. The apple tasted terrible. It was mushy and had that sharp, fermented flavor that comes when fruit starts to rot. But Lisa chewed it anyway and smiled at her daughter. "It's not so bad. Try a little piece." Mia took the apple with both her small hands. Her fingers were red from the cold, and Lisa noticed how thin her daughter had gotten over the past 3 months. Mia's favorite pink coat, which used to fit her perfectly, now hung loose on her tiny frame. Her cheeks, once round and rosy, had become hollow and pale. They had been living on the street since July. Lisa still remembered that awful day when the landlord came with the eviction notice. She had been working 2 part-time jobs, but it still wasn't enough to pay rent after her ex-husband stopped sending child support. She had begged for more time, promised to pay double the next month, but the landlord just shook his head. "Business is business," he had said, not looking her in the eyes. The homeless shelters in town were always full. Lisa had called every single one, sometimes waiting on hold for hours just to be told there were no beds available. The few times they did get a spot, they could only stay for 1 night before being turned back out onto the streets. "Mommy, why? Does it taste funny?" Mia asked, making a face as she chewed the apple. "Sometimes when fruit gets old, it tastes different. But it's still food and we need to eat," Lisa explained, taking another bite herself. The truth was, she was scared. Scared that this moldy apple might make them sick. Scared that winter was coming and they still had nowhere to go. Scared that she was failing as a mother. From inside the barn, they could hear soft sounds. The gentle lowing of cows, the rustle of hay, and footsteps moving around. Someone was in there, probably finishing up evening chores. Lisa had noticed this farm 3 days ago when they were walking along the country road looking for a safe place to sleep. It seemed peaceful and quiet, far from the busy town where police officers sometimes told them to move along. The farmer who owned this place seemed kind. She had watched him from a distance that morning as he fed chickens in his yard. He was an older man with gray hair and gentle movements. He had even left out a bowl of water for a stray cat that came around. That small act of kindness gave Lisa hope that maybe, just maybe, this would be a safe place for them to rest for the night. Mia finished her small piece of apple and leaned against her mother's shoulder. "I'm cold, Mommy." Lisa wrapped her arms around her daughter, trying to share what little body heat she had. Mia's hair smelled like the cheap shampoo from the gas station bathroom where they had washed up yesterday. Lisa had used almost all of their remaining money to buy that tiny bottle of shampoo, because she couldn't stand seeing her daughter's hair get dirty and tangled. The wind picked up again, and Lisa felt Mia shiver against her. She looked up at the darkening sky and saw thick clouds gathering. It looked like rain was coming, maybe even an early snow. They needed to find shelter soon. "Are we going to sleep here tonight?" Mia asked, looking around at the bare ground covered with fallen leaves. Lisa didn't know how to answer. She had been asking herself the same question. The barn looked warm and dry, but she was terrified of getting caught trespassing. What if the farmer called the police? What if they got arrested? She couldn't bear the thought of Mia being taken away from her and put into foster care. But as she looked at her daughter's pale face and heard her small cough that had been getting worse over the past week, Lisa realized she might not have a choice. Mia needed warmth and shelter more than Lisa needed to worry about getting in trouble. "We'll figure something out, baby." "We always do," Lisa whispered, though she wasn't sure she believed her own words anymore. The sound of footsteps inside the barn grew closer to the door. Lisa's heart started beating faster. She grabbed Mia's hand, ready to run if they needed to. But where would they go? The nearest town was 5 miles away, and Mia's shoes had holes in them that would make walking that far painful. Lisa closed her eyes and made a silent prayer, something she hadn't done since she was Mia's age. She prayed for strength, for warmth, for some kind of miracle that would help them through another night. She prayed that somehow, someday, she would be able to give her daughter the life she deserved. Mia coughed again, a dry sound that worried Lisa more than she wanted to admit. Her daughter needed medicine, needed warm food, needed a real bed to sleep in. All the things that Lisa used to take for granted when they had their little apartment seemed like impossible luxuries now. Barn door creaked and Lisa held her breath. This was it. They were about to be discovered. She squeezed Mia's hand and prepared to explain why they were on someone else's property, eating rotten apples and trying to stay warm behind a stranger's barn. But sometimes, when you've lost all hope and think the world has forgotten about you, that's exactly when something unexpected happens. Sometimes a guardian angel appears in the most ordinary form, wearing work boots and carrying a bucket of fresh milk, ready to remind you that there are still good people in this world who believe in helping others. The barn door swung open with a gentle creak, and Robert stepped out carrying a heavy metal bucket. Steam rose from the fresh milk inside, creating small clouds in the cold evening air. He was a man in his early 60s with weathered hands that spoke of decades spent working the land. His gray beard was neatly trimmed, and despite his simple work clothes, there was something dignified about the way he carried himself. Robert had been finishing his evening chores when he heard something unusual outside. At first, he thought it might be that stray cat again, the orange tabby that sometimes came around looking for scraps. But then he heard what sounded like quiet voices, human voices, coming from behind his barn. He set the milk bucket down carefully on the wooden step and wiped his hands on his worn jeans. Robert had lived alone on this farm for 8 years now, ever since his wife Helen passed away from cancer. The silence had become his companion, so any unexpected sound always caught his attention. As he walked around the corner of the barn, Robert stopped in his tracks. There, huddled against the wooden wall, were 2 figures, a woman and a small child, both wearing clothes that had seen better days. The woman looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes, like a deer caught in headlights. Her arm was wrapped protectively around the little girl, who couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. Robert's first instinct was surprise, but that quickly melted into concern. In the fading daylight, he could see that both of them looked thin and cold. The woman's face was gaunt, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of many sleepless nights. The child was shivering despite being bundled up in a coat that was too big for her small frame. "Oh," Robert said softly, not wanting to startle them further. He could see the fear in the woman's eyes, the way she seemed ready to grab her daughter and run at any moment. "I didn't expect to find anyone out here." Lisa's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. This was it. They were caught. She started to stand up, pulling Mia with her, ready to apologize and run. But something in the man's voice made her pause. There was no anger there, no harsh demand for them to get off his property. Instead, he sounded almost gentle. "I'm sorry," Lisa began, her voice shaking. We didn't mean any harm. We were just trying to stay warm for a little while. We'll leave right now, I promise." Robert held up his hand in a calming gesture. "Wait, please, there's no need to run off." He took a step closer and noticed the half-eaten apple in the little girl's hands. It was clearly past its prime, brown and soft. His heart clenched as he realized what he was seeing. These 2 weren't just cold and tired. They were hungry. Really hungry. The farmer and Robert had seen plenty of animals in distress over the years, and he had learned to recognize the signs. But seeing it in human beings, especially a child, hit him differently. It reminded him of stories his own grandmother used to tell about the Great Depression, when people had to make do with whatever they could find. Mia pressed closer to her, "Mother," but her curious eyes stayed fixed on Robert. There was something about this old man that didn't seem scary. He reminded her of her grandfather, who used to give her piggyback rides before he died 2 years ago. This man had the same kind, eyes and gentle way of moving. "My name is Robert," he said, crouching down slightly so he wouldn't seem so tall and intimidating. "This is my farm. What are your names?" Lisa hesitated for a moment, then decided that honesty might be their best option. "I'm Lisa, and this is my daughter Mia." "It's nice to meet you both," Robert said, and he meant it. "I couldn't help but notice that you look pretty cold out here. And hungry too." He gestured toward the apple in Mia's hands. Lisa felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She hated that this stranger could see how desperate they had become. "We found it," she said, quickly. "We didn't steal it or anything. It was in a dumpster behind the grocery store." Robert nodded without judgment. He had lived through enough hard times to know that sometimes people had to do things they never thought they would do just to survive. During his own childhood, his family had faced lean years when crops failed and money was tight. He remembered his mother making soup from potato peels and being grateful for it. The wind picked up again, and Robert watched as both Lisa and Mia shivered. That made his decision for him. He couldn't let them stay out here in the cold, especially with the little girl looking so frail. His wife Helen would have been horrified if she knew he even considered leaving them outside. "Listen," Robert said, his voice warm and steady. "It's getting pretty cold out here, and I think we might get some rain tonight. Maybe even snow." He started to shrug out of his thick work jacket, a sturdy brown leather coat that had kept him warm through many harsh winters. "Why don't you both come inside where it's warm?" Lisa stared at him in disbelief. "Inside? You want us to come into your house?" "Of course," Robert said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. He held out his jacket toward them. "Here, put this around the little one, she's shivering." Lisa looked at the jacket, then back at Robert's face, searching for any sign of deception or hidden motives. She had learned to be suspicious of kindness from strangers. Too many people had made promises they didn't keep, or worse, had offered help that came with strings attached. But something about this man felt different. Maybe it was the way he spoke to Mia with such gentleness, or how he offered his own coat without hesitation. "I don't understand," Lisa said slowly. "Why would you help us? You don't even know us." Robert smiled, and for the first time Lisa saw crow's feet around his eyes that spoke of many years of laughter. "Helen, that was my wife. She always used to say that kindness doesn't need a reason. She'd say that if you wait to help someone until you know their whole story, you might wait too long." He took another step closer and held out the jacket again. "Besides, that little girl looks about the same age my granddaughter would have been, if my son and his wife had been blessed with children. I know what it's like to worry about someone you love." Mia looked up at her mother with hopeful eyes. The old man seemed nice, and the thought of going somewhere warm made her feel excited. For the first time in weeks. "Can we, Mommy? Please?" Lisa felt tears starting to form in her eyes. When was the last time someone had shown them such simple, uncomplicated kindness? When was the last time someone had looked at them and seen human beings worth helping instead of problems to be avoided? "Are you sure?" Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "We don't want to be any trouble." Robert wrapped his jacket around Mia's shoulders, and it was so big on her that it nearly reached the ground. "Trouble? Young lady, the only trouble would be me knowing you were out here in the cold and doing nothing about it. Now come on, let's get you both warmed up and maybe get some real food in your stomachs." As they walked toward the farmhouse, Lisa felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. The farmhouse kitchen was the warmest place Lisa had felt in months. The moment they stepped inside, she felt the blessed heat wrap around them like a gentle hug. The room smelled like home-cooked meals and coffee, mixed with the faint scent of wood from the fireplace in the next room. Yellow light from old-fashioned lamps made everything feel cozy and safe, Robert's jacket was still draped around Mia's small shoulders, and she looked like she was swimming in it. But for the first time in weeks, she wasn't shivering. Her cheeks were starting to get some color back, and Lisa noticed her daughter's eyes were wide with wonder as she took in their surroundings. The kitchen was clearly lived in but clean. Wooden cabinets lined the walls, painted a soft cream color that had probably been white years ago. The countertops were old but well-maintained, and there was a large farmhouse sink under a window that probably looked out over the fields during the day. A small table sat in the corner with two mismatched chairs, and Lisa realized that Robert probably ate most of his meals alone. "Please sit down," Robert said, pulling out one of the chairs for Lisa and then dragging another chair from somewhere else in the house for Mia. "Make yourselves comfortable." Lisa sat down carefully, still not quite believing this was really happening. She kept expecting Robert to change his mind or to start asking them uncomfortable questions, or to reveal that his kindness came with conditions. But he simply moved around the kitchen with quiet efficiency, like he had done this 1,000 times before. "When did you two last have a proper meal?" Robert asked gently as he opened the refrigerator. Lisa felt her face burn with shame. "We had some crackers yesterday morning," she admitted quietly. It was embarrassing to say out loud, but she was too tired to lie anymore. Robert paused in what he was doing and turned to look at her. There was no judgment in his eyes, only concern. "Yesterday morning? That's too long, especially for a growing child." He pulled out a large pot from one of the lower cabinets and set it on the old gas stove. Lisa watched as he moved around the kitchen, gathering ingredients. Vegetables from the refrigerator, some kind of meat from the freezer, cans from the pantry. His movements were practiced and confident, like someone who had been cooking for himself for a long time. "I hope you don't mind soup," Robert said as he started chopping an onion. "It's about the fastest way I know to make something filling and warm. My wife Helen taught me this recipe years ago. She always said soup was good for healing both the body and the soul." Mia had been quiet since they came inside, but now she spoke up in a small voice. "My grandma used to make soup too, before she got sick." Robert smiled at her. "Your grandma sounds like she was a wise woman. What kind of soup did she make?" "Chicken soup with big noodles," Mia said, and for the first time in months, Lisa heard something like happiness in her daughter's voice. "She said it was magic soup because it made everything better." "I think your grandma was right about that," Robert said, adding the chopped vegetables to the pot. "Soup does have a way of making things better." As the soup began to simmer, filling the kitchen with rich, comforting smells, Robert busied himself making other preparations. He sliced thick pieces of bread from a homemade loaf and put them in the oven to warm. He set the table with real plates and cloth napkins, not paper ones. He even found a small glass of milk for Mia. Lisa watched all of this in amazement. When was the last time someone had gone to such trouble for them? When was the last time anyone had treated them like they mattered, like they were worth the effort of a home-cooked meal? "Why are you being so kind to us?" Lisa asked suddenly. The question had been burning inside her since Robert first offered them his coat. "You don't know anything about us. We could be dangerous or something." Robert chuckled softly as he stirred the soup. "Well, I have to say, you don't look particularly dangerous to me. Besides, I'm a pretty good judge of character after all these years." He paused and looked at her seriously. "But mainly, I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do, and because I know what it's like to need help." "You do?" Lisa asked, surprised. Robert seemed so stable, so secure in his life on the farm. "Oh, yes," Robert said, sitting down at the table while they waited for the soup to finish cooking. "When Helen was sick toward the end, we went through our savings pretty quickly. Medical bills, you know. There were times when neighbors brought us meals because they knew I was spending all my time at the hospital and wasn't taking care of myself. There were times when people helped us, when we were too proud to ask for it." He looked out the window, into the growing darkness. "After Helen passed away, I went through a really dark time. Didn't want to get out of bed, didn't want to eat, didn't see the point in much of anything. It was my neighbor, old Joe from the next farm over, who kept showing up. He'd do my chores, bring me food, just sit with me when I didn't want to be, alone, never asked for anything in return. Lisa felt her throat tighten with emotion. She hadn't expected Robert to share something so personal with them. "Joe saved my life, I think," Robert continued, not in some dramatic way, but in all the small, everyday ways that really matter. "He showed me that sometimes helping others is how we help ourselves heal too." The soup was ready, and Robert ladled generous portions into their bowls. The steam rose up carrying the most wonderful smell Lisa had experienced in months. Real vegetables, real meat, herbs and spices that made her mouth water. When he set the bowl in front of her, she almost cried. Mia didn't wait for permission. She picked up her spoon and started eating immediately, making little sounds of pleasure that broke Lisa's heart. Her daughter was so hungry that she was practically inhaling the soup, and Lisa had to gently remind her to slow down so she wouldn't make herself sick. "This is the best soup I ever had," Mia declared between spoonfuls. Robert beamed at the compliment. "I'll have to tell Helen when I visit her, grave next week. She'd be so pleased to know her recipe is still making people happy." As they ate, Lisa found herself relaxing for the first time in months. The warmth of the food in her stomach, the safety of the kitchen walls around them, the gentle presence of this kind man who asked for nothing in return. It all combined to create something she had almost forgotten existed. Peace. But even as she ate the delicious soup and felt her strength returning, Lisa couldn't help but worry about tomorrow. What would happen when morning came? Would Robert expect them to leave? Where would they go? How long could this kindness possibly last? As if reading her thoughts, Robert set down his spoon and looked at both of them with serious but gentle eyes. "I know you're probably wondering, what happens next?" he said quietly. "And I want you to know that you're welcome to stay here tonight. Both of you. I have a guest room that doesn't get much use anymore, and it would make me feel better knowing you're safe and warm." Lisa stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "A real bed? A real room? For the night? Are you sure?" she whispered. Robert smiled. "I'm sure. We'll figure out tomorrow when tomorrow comes." Lisa woke up to something she hadn't experienced in 3 months. Complete silence. No traffic noise, no sirens, no sounds of other people struggling to survive on the streets. Just the gentle whisper of wind through trees and the distant sound of roosters greeting the morning. For a moment she forgot where she was and panic started to set in. Then she felt the softness of real sheets beneath her and remembered. They were safe. They were in Robert's guest room. The bed was the most comfortable thing Lisa had felt in months. It wasn't fancy, just a simple double bed with a handmade quilt that smelled like lavender and sunshine. But after sleeping on park benches and cold concrete, it felt like heaven. Mia was still asleep beside her, her face peaceful and relaxed, in a way Lisa hadn't seen since before they lost their apartment. Sunlight was streaming through the white curtains, and Lisa could hear movement in the kitchen downstairs. The smell of coffee and bacon drifted up through the old farmhouse, making her stomach rumble with hunger. Real hunger this time, not the desperate, painful emptiness she had grown used to, but the normal, healthy hunger of someone who knew food would be available. "Mommy?" Mia stirred beside her, blinking in the morning light. "Are we still at the nice man's house?" "Yes, sweetheart. We're still here." Lisa smoothed her daughter's hair, which was tangled from the first good night's sleep they'd had in months. "How did you sleep?" "Really good," Mia said, stretching like a cat. "The bed is so soft, and it smells nice, like flowers." There was a gentle knock on the door and Robert's voice called out, "Good morning, ladies. I hope you slept well. Breakfast is ready whenever you are." Lisa felt that familiar surge of gratitude mixed with disbelief. Even after a full night, Robert was still being kind to them, still treating them like welcome guests instead of unwanted strangers. They got dressed quickly, the same clothes they had been wearing for days, which made Lisa feel self-conscious. But when they came downstairs to the kitchen, Robert greeted them with such genuine warmth that her embarrassment faded. "I hope you're hungry," he said, gesturing to the table, which was set with a full breakfast. Scrambled eggs, bacon, toast, orange juice, and coffee. more food than Lisa and Mia usually saw in a week. As they ate, Robert made casual conversation, asking Mia about school and what she liked to do for fun. Lisa was amazed at how naturally her daughter responded, chattering about her favorite books and the drawing she liked to do. It was like seeing the real Mia emerge from the scared, hungry child she had become over the past months. After breakfast, Robert showed them around the farm. It wasn't huge, but it was well maintained and clearly loved. There were chickens pecking around the yard, a few cows in the pasture, and a vegetable garden that was mostly finished for the season, but still had some late tomatoes and squash. "Would you like to help me collect the eggs?" Robert asked Mia, who nodded eagerly. Lisa watched her daughter carefully reach into the nesting boxes, her face lighting up each time she found an egg. It was such a simple thing, but Mia acted like she had discovered treasure. Lisa realized how many normal childhood experiences her daughter had missed during their months on the street. "She's a natural," Robert said quietly, standing beside Lisa as they watched Mia gently talk to the chickens. Helen always said children and animals understand each other in ways adults forget. She used to love going to the petting zoo, Lisa said sadly. Before everything fell apart. Robert looked at her with understanding eyes. "Do you want to talk about what happened? Sometimes it helps to tell someone who doesn't know the whole story." Lisa hesitated. She had gotten used to keeping their troubles to herself, but something about Robert's quiet presence made her feel safe enough to open up. "I used to have a good job," she began slowly. "I worked at a dental office as a receptionist. It wasn't much money, but it was enough for our little apartment and to take care of Mia. Then the office closed down when the dentist retired and I couldn't find another job that paid enough." She watched Mia carefully place eggs in the basket Robert had given her. "I tried everything. Fast food, cleaning offices at night, even selling some of our belongings. But without childcare, it was impossible to work full-time hours and part-time. Work just wasn't enough to cover rent and food and everything else." Robert nodded, not interrupting or judging, just listening. "The worst part," Lisa continued, her voice getting quieter, "was watching Mia try to understand why we couldn't go home anymore. Why we had to sleep in the car, then in shelters when we could get in, then on the streets when we couldn't. She never complained, not once. She just adapted, and that broke my heart more than anything." "You're a good mother," Robert said firmly. "I can see how much she loves you and how much you love her. That's what matters most." Lisa felt tears threatening again. "I don't feel like a good mother. Good mothers don't let their children eat rotten apples behind strangers' barns." "Good mothers do whatever it takes to keep their children alive," Robert corrected gently. "And you did that. You kept her safe, you kept going when everything seemed hopeless, and you brought her through the hardest time of both your lives. That's not failure, Lisa. That's heroism." They spent the rest of the morning working together around the farm. Robert found small tasks for Lisa to help with, organizing tools in the barn, hanging laundry on the line, weeding the last of the garden. He insisted on paying her for the work, despite her protests. "I'm not running a charity," he said with a smile. "I'm hiring help. There's a difference." But Lisa could see through his kindness. The tasks he gave her weren't really necessary. They were his way of giving her money without making her feel like she was taking handouts. Mia followed them around, chattering happily and asking questions about everything. She helped feed the chickens, learned to brush one of the gentler cows, and spent a long time sitting in the barn with a litter of kittens that the barn cat had recently had. As the day went on, Lisa found herself relaxing more and more. The constant tension she had carried in her shoulders for months began to ease. She laughed at Mia's jokes, enjoyed the simple pleasure of working with her hands, and felt like a human being again instead of just someone trying to survive. That evening, as they sat down to another home-cooked meal, Robert made an announcement that changed everything. "I've been thinking," he said carefully, "about your situation, and I have a proposition for you both." Lisa's heart started beating faster. Here it comes, she thought. The conditions, the expectations, the price for his kindness. I called my Friend who runs the veterinary clinic in town, Robert continued. They've been looking for someone to help with their office work and cleaning. It's not fancy, but it's steady work with decent pay. Dr. Martinez said she'd be willing to interview you if you're interested. Lisa stared at him in shock. You found me a job? Well, I found you an opportunity, Robert corrected. The job is yours to earn, but I thought it might be a start. I don't know what to say, Lisa whispered. Robert smiled. You don't have to say anything yet. Just think about it. And in the meantime, you're both welcome to stay here as long as you need to get back on your feet. 3 months had passed since that cold October evening when Lisa and Mia first crouched behind Robert's barn, sharing a rotten apple. Now, as winter was finally giving way to early spring, Lisa stood in that same spot, but everything about her had changed. She wore a warm winter coat that actually fit her properly, and her face had filled out again. The dark circles under her eyes were gone, replaced by a brightness that hadn't been there in a long time. Mia ran ahead of her, no longer the thin, scared child who had hidden behind her mother's legs. She was wearing new shoes with no holes, and her laughter rang out across the farmyard as she chased after the chickens. Her cheeks were rosy from the crisp air, and she moved with the confident energy of a child who knew she was safe and loved. Robert, Mia called out as she spotted the old farmer coming out of the barn. Look what I've found. She held up a perfectly round stone she had discovered near the creek. Robert smiled and crouched down to examine her treasure, with the same serious attention he gave to everything that mattered to Mia. That's a beautiful one, he said. We should add it to your collection. Lisa watched this interaction with a heart so full of gratitude it sometimes hurt. Over the past 3 months, Robert had become like a grandfather to Mia, and the relationship had been healing for both of them. He had taught her to milk cows, shown her how to identify different birds, and spent countless evenings reading to her by the fireplace. In return, Mia had brought laughter and purpose back into his quiet house. The job at the veterinary clinic had worked out better than Lisa had dared to hope. Dr. Martinez was a kind woman who understood that Lisa needed flexible hours to be there for Mia after school. The work itself was satisfying, helping sick animals get better, comforting worried pet owners, keeping the clinic organized and running smoothly. It felt good to be useful again, to contribute something meaningful to the world. With her first few paychecks, Lisa had been able to rent a small apartment in town. It wasn't much, just 2 bedrooms above the bakery on Main Street, but it was theirs, clean, safe, and affordable. She would never take for granted again the simple pleasure of having her own key, her own front door, her own space where no one could tell them to move along. But even though they had their own place now, they still came to the farm every weekend. It had become their tradition, their way of staying connected to the man who had saved their lives and the place where they had learned to hope again. How was your week at work? Robert asked Lisa as they walked toward the house together. Mia had run ahead to check on the barn cats who were growing bigger every week. Good, Lisa said, and she meant it. Really good. Dr. Martinez said she's thinking about giving me more responsibilities, maybe letting me help with some of the bookkeeping. That's wonderful, Robert said, and the pride in his voice made Lisa's chest feel warm. You've worked hard for this. As they reached the farmhouse porch, Lisa paused and looked back at the barn where this whole journey had started. It seemed impossible that just 3 months ago she had been so desperate, so lost, so convinced that she had failed at everything that mattered. I never properly thanked you, she said suddenly. Robert looked surprised. What do you mean? You thank me every time you come here? No, I mean really thanked you, Lisa said, turning to face him. What you did for us. It was more than just giving us food and shelter. You gave us back our dignity. You treated us like human beings when the world had made us feel invisible. Robert's weathered face softened. Lisa, you don't need to thank me for being decent. Besides, you've given me just as much as I've given you. What do you mean? Before you and Mia came along, I was just going through the motions, Robert explained. Getting up, doing my chores, going to bed. I was alive, but I wasn't really living. Having you both here, watching Mia discover new things, seeing you rebuild your life piece by piece, it reminded me what it feels like to be part of something bigger than myself." He gestured toward the barn where Mia was now sitting cross-legged, letting 3 kittens climb all over her. "Helen and I always regretted that we never had grandchildren. We tried for years to have children of our own, but it just wasn't meant to be. Then Mia came into my life like a little ray of sunshine, and suddenly I understood what I'd been missing." Lisa felt tears starting to form in her eyes. "She loves you so much. You've been more of a father figure to her than her own father ever was." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Mia giggle as one of the kittens tried to climb onto her head. The sound of her laughter mixed with the gentle sounds of the farm, cows lowing in the distance, chickens clucking around the yard, the whisper of wind through the trees that were just starting to show tiny green buds. "I have something I want to talk to you both about," Robert said eventually. "Something I've been thinking about for a while now." Lisa looked at him curiously. "What is it?" "Well," Robert said, seeming a bit nervous, "this farm is getting to be a lot for one old man to handle. And I've been thinking that it might be nice to have some help around here on a more permanent basis." Lisa's heart started beating faster. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if you and Mia would be interested, I'd like to offer you both a permanent place here," Robert said, the words coming out in a rush. "Not as guests, but as family. You could keep your apartment in town if you want, or you could move back here full-time. Either way, this would always be your home too." Lisa stared at him in shock. "Robert, we couldn't possibly." "Why not?" he asked gently. "You've already proven you're not afraid of hard work. Mia loves it here. And honestly, it would make this old man very happy to have you both around more often." Before Lisa could respond, Mia came running over, her arms full of kittens. "Guess what?" she said excitedly. "Buttercup had her babies. There are 5 tiny little kittens in the barn." "5 new kittens?" Robert said with exaggerated amazement. "Well, that settles it. We're definitely going to need extra help around here now." Mia looked confused. "Extra help with what?" Robert knelt down to her level. "Mia, how would you feel about spending even more time here on the farm? Maybe even living here with me and your mom?" Mia's eyes went wide. "Really? We could live here? With the chickens and the cows and the kittens?" "If your mom says yes," Robert said, looking up at Lisa with hopeful eyes. Lisa looked around at the farm that had become their sanctuary, at the man who had shown them such unexpected kindness, at her daughter whose face was glowing with pure joy at the possibility. She thought about the long journey that had brought them here, from that desperate night behind the barn to this moment of new beginnings. "Yes," she said softly, then louder. "Yes. We'd love to." Mia let out a whoop of excitement that sent the kittens scattering, and Robert's face broke into the biggest smile Lisa had ever seen from him. As the 3 of them stood there in the spring sunshine, surrounded by the peaceful sounds of the farm, Lisa realized that sometimes angels do come disguised as ordinary farmers who know exactly the right moment to remove their coat and say, "Come in." And sometimes when you've lost everything and think your story is over, that's exactly when the best chapter of your life begins.